where did the PIP journey start in Kenya? The first EOI, that's expression of interest we got, was actually in 2018. Since then, we have gotten more. We have gotten 3 expressions of interest. Initially, at that time, we still had funding from the financial and did not pay a lot of attention into the PIPs or PPPs. But nevertheless, as KETRACO, we decided to build capacity. So there's a lot of capacity building we did with the help of the financiers, with the help of the World Bank, ADB, Power Africa, to make sure by the time these PPPs come in place, we have a system and people who are capable of running with it. And I'm proud to say that the team you are seeing here, most of them have been trained in this and they are quite good at it. Now, currently, we have 10 projects which are being considered for development under PIP, that's proposal, privately initiated proposals. 3 private firms have expressed interest to develop this transmission line through PIPs. 2 of them have already reached the negotiation stage, and 1 of them is still at the proposal stage. 5 projects are still earmarked to go under solicited, that is competitive bids, but still under PPP. So this gives you an outline that we still have competitive, we still have PIPs, and they will come in the line as we get the budget. Now, if I start with the first proponent, I think you had the CS and also my colleague and the CEO. That is Africa 50 and Power Grid of India. The EOI was done in 2018, and the status is now at negotiation stage. This has 2 projects. That is 73 kilometers, 220 Kisumu, Kakamega, Musaga. And this is to extend the high voltage line from Kaka to Kakamega and improve system reliability for the western region. Secondly, you have the 179, Lesos Losuk. These are 400 kV, which will end up at Lesos. And this will have 2 fronts. One of it is to increase stability. It will be an alternative path for Lake Turkana to Suswa. This has had some issues, and whenever we have challenges, most of the time we have blackouts. So this will provide an alternative. And in addition, by 2027, 2028, we expect the Paka region to have generation, GDC, and also will assist in that. Now, these 2 proposals, currently where we are, we have, they have done their project development. That's complete. Currently, we are negotiating and drafting of the project agreement. That is in progress for both of them. The second set of projects, that is the ones by Adani Energy Solutions. The EOI was done early 2023, and we are also at the negotiation stage. This has 4 projects. The first one is 206 kilometers, 400 kV, Gilgil, Thika, Malaa, Konza, the one which my CEO just alluded to, having a ring around the Greater Nairobi to ensure that we can supply from either way in case one of the line goes out. Currently also, they have done the project development, which is complete. Project and financial and risk assessment report is complete. We are also negotiating, and draft project agreement is also in progress. The second project by them is the 400 kV. These are 2 of them. It's a 400 kV stroke 220, 132 substation at Rongai. Again, this is more for the future, which will be taking the ring to Lake Victoria ring. It will go to Tanzania and back to Mwanza and back to Uganda. It's the same stage. All these projects by Adani are in the same stage. That is currently negotiations and draft projects agreement in process. Part of that Rongai is the line from Rongai to Keringet. These are 220. And the idea is to offload the current offloaded Chemosit Moroni line. That line, if you recall back 1 year or 2 behind, it has been a cause of national blackout. And most of the time, the line is overloaded up to around 200, 150, and 200. So there is need to really deload that line as fast as possible. The other line they have is Menengai, Olkalau, Rumuruti, also to extend the voltage to Olkalau and improve reliability in Olkarau and Nyahururu area. Then the last one is Toduboro, which the CS also alluded to, and that is in near Sondo. The third proponent is EDF from France, the utility in France. They indicated that they are interested in carrying out a PIP, and this was done early this year. They have 4 projects which they are proposing to do a PIP. The first one is Kiambere at Mutomo. They will do a 220 kV substation. These are very long line from Kiambere to Rabai, and one of the problems we have is the high voltages, which you have heard my colleagues talk about. By splitting the line, you will actually be able to try and minimize that and also provide the alternative supply, because this will be connected to Makindu. We also have Malathika Tatu, that's a 220, and the idea of this one is just to complete the 220 kV ring. Most of the big urban centers, what they do is that they have an outer 400 kV ring, then a middle 200 kV ring before you have the distribution. That's normally the progress for most capital cities, and that's where we are trying to head. For the 220 kV ring, it's almost complete. It's only this link which is left. So that is proposed to be finalized by EDF. Then you have the VOI, 400 to 132. These are some of the reinforcement on the 132 kV line. And the bigger picture of this is that these, Makindu and Konza, are supposed to play a part in the electrification of the SGR. Without them, you would have supply dips and would not be able to electrify. So this is a long-term project to ensure that those substations are in place for any future electrification of the SGR. Now, there is one part which I had not touched on, and that is the expected date. For this one, which are currently at proposal stage, you can see all of them are 2029, and the earlier ones, if you could check the earlier ones, if I go back slowly, you'll find they range from 2027, 2026, they have 2026, 2027, 2027, 2028, 2028. So these are projects which are earmarked to be complete by those years. What does it mean? Let's assume let's say it's Africa 50. Let's assume we do all the negotiations, we agree with them. Let's assume by December we finish, and these are commercial closure. What the PPP Act allows is that another 12 months for financial closure before it can be effective. That takes us to the end of 2025. Now, in just normal construction, we take around, that's for KETRACO through the normal funding, which comes from the exchequer. We take around 4 to 5 years. That tells you where we would be. PPP, we are giving them a timeline. We expect them to do it in 2 years. So they will be in tandem with what the TMP, that's the Transmission Master Plan, or the Least Cost Development Plan. That's the mother of the plans for the sector. Transmission Master Plan is removed from there. So that is what is expected. If they don't come in that time, of course, there will be repercussions in terms of quality of supply, in terms of more energy blackouts. That is something we foresee. And even worse, where we expect the generation from Paka to come in 2026, 2027, if the Losuk line is not there, we'll have a lot of issues in terms of evacuating power from there. Apart from that, we can also go to the competitive ones. PPP allows either you go competitive or PIP. It also has restricted, although that is rarely used, it's more specialized. So we use it's either competitive or the PIPs. So we also have a set of projects which are earmarked to be done through the competitive PPP. Now this, I'll mention the 5 of them. That's Meru Maua, you have Kwale Shimoni, you have Kipevu Baraki, you have Kiambere Maua, and you also have Kidambo Odaya Kiganjo. The interesting thing, even the ones which are in PIP were initially supposed to be done through PPPs, but I will show you maybe why the decisions are being taken to go this way. They were initially marked, but there is some delay, therefore we moved to that. And that's why I come to this slide. This slide, when you see solicited PPPs, that means competitive. Unsolicited are the ones which are privately initiated. Those are the two different kinds. There are very many pros and cons. They can fill 2 pages. But what I picked is what is pertinent to KETRACO's situation at the moment. So these are just the comparison for KETRACO because this is the situation we find ourselves in. What do we do? For the competitive one, it's straightforward. It's a no-brainer that there will be competition and the price can go down. That is the driving point of the competitive. But there's also a flip side to it, that you actually require upfront funding. You need a transaction advisor, you have to do bid preparation, you have to do the structure. As you heard, PPP is quite complex, so you have to do the structuring, you have to do the bid preparation, you have to do tendering, evaluation, you have to get the well-live cost upfront, and all other issues which are concerned. Now, if I give you an example. We have said that we have 2 PPPs by Africa 50. We have 4 PIPs with Adani. If we were to ask the exchequer to give us money to do this upfront, we would require 10 billion. That's the kind of money we are talking about. And that, in this fiscal space, is not easy to get. So you'll find, initially, whether we thought we'd go this way, and the timelines are ticking, and these projects are not being made, then we have to think what alternative is there. Of course, we have to say that it also requires more time to do all these things. It requires around 3 to more above years. Now, come to the PIPs. What is there for PIPs? The PIPs, the advantage, main advantage, is that they provide upfront financing. Because it is the private investor to do the money, everything, and provide it upfront. So you don't have the problem of having lacking money, which you cannot get from NT. Also, the PPP Act. By the way, the PPP Act is one of the most progressive PPP acts in the world. Just like the Constitution 2010 of Kenya, it's similar. A lot of the drafting has gone with it, and it has taken best practices in most countries. So it's a good act. We just have to use it prudently. So in terms of this, it also gives timeline. Once the PIP is submitted, unless there's some extension, you are expected that within 15 to 16 months, you have completed, and you move on. You have completed project agreement, and you go to financial closure. So you can see it gives a lot of timeline, and it doesn't give you time to waste. And the idea was to make sure we don't have anybody just come in and saying, I have a PPP, and waste a lot of time. Once you submit, then the clock starts ticking. Then you require very little money, of course, for the transaction advisor to help you maybe in terms of negotiations or evaluation. But it also has a downside. It's seen to lack competition. So that is area which for PIP, you have to be careful as a contracting authority. One of them is the main one is the high price. I will still talk about it later, maybe how we will deal with that. And the worst is it could be perceived or could be lacking transparency, accountability, and leading to opportunities of corruption. So if this PIP is not used well, and if information is not given to the public, as per the Act, because the Act is very clear what you are supposed to do, and there are steps, each step what you are supposed to do, so that the public can perceive or see what you are doing is okay. Now, if that's not done, there will be a perception. Rightfully or not, there will be a perception. And it is an avenue for corruption. So we are all aware to this. That's not in doubt. So the idea is to make sure the public has as much information as possible. And that's the only way we can proceed either in PPPs or PIPs. Because the country has reached a stage where we need to develop these projects. We don't have the money. But let us not misuse the PIPs. Let us use them adequately. Let us use them well. Let the public know what we are doing, and then we'll be in a good place. Normally, according to the Act, the private investor is supposed to submit a PIP. Of course, what we did, just to make sure that we can be able to keep tabs on what is happening, we said you first have to have an expression of interest through the ministry, and that way we know at each stage there are how many and who is doing it. Others would have everybody coming with their PIP and submitting, but that is a way of just keeping records. So once they submit the PIP is just privately initiated proposal. And in the Act, it gives what is supposed to be in that proposal. It gives all the documentations, very, very clear, that this and this and this and this should be attached. And that's what you submit. The moment you submit that to the, when you see CA, that's a contracting authority, and in this case it's KETRACO. Tomorrow it could be KENA. So when they receive that document, with the help of the PPP Directorate, they form an evaluation committee. That evaluation committee is jointly between the CA and the PPP Directorate to go through that proposal. After they have evaluated that proposal, there is a report. That report is taken to the PPP Directorate. And then the PPP Directorate looks at it and makes a recommendation which goes to submit to the PPP committee. From the PPP committee, it might be allowed to extend. But he has to do within 6 months and now submit the same again to the contracting authority. Then again, the contracting authority has to appoint an evaluation team together with the PPP Directorate. So remember now there are 2 stages of evaluation, not just the PIP proposal. There's also now, after you have done a more detailed assessment of the project, the costs are more clearer. It's easy to now be able to do any value for money test or such. So from there is when now it goes back to the committee. From the committee, again, they go through it, they see whether it has met all the criteria, and the criteria are also listed. So the act is very clear. It doesn't allow you to deviate. If you follow the act, it's very clear. So with that, the committee will make another decision and allow for you to progress to negotiations. And that is now at stage where we currently are with the Africa 50 Power Grid, that's one consortium, and then Adani Energy Solutions. Now, if I might just go back a bit, some of the conditions which are given for the privately initiated proposal. What do you check? Because this, I've just lifted it from the Act. The first thing you have to answer, is this project aligned to the nation's infrastructure priority? Is it aligned to the societal need? That's the first thing when they go to check, they have to look at. And for KETRACO, it's pretty straightforward because what happens, we have a least cost development plan for the sector. That's the mother. It goes for 20 years. KETRACO removes the transmission master plan because it's part of the least cost for the next 20 years. And we know which project is supposed to come at what stage. So at any one time, we'll tell you yes, and as the CEO showed you, go to the website, you'll be able to see the transmission master plan, you'll be able to see the timelines for all those projects. So yes, it meets with our priority, just on a broader level. Then you have to test for value for money. And this is a very important part of it. At this stage of the PIP proposal, it might be at a slightly earlier stage before they have done project development. So the cost might not be very detailed to a lower percentage in terms of error. But even with this, you're supposed to carry out value for money. And the value for money, you do it both ways. You do one in terms of qualitative, what are the qualitative benefits, and then you can also do it quantitative. Most of the time at this level, it is qualitative because you know you'll do another one after project development when the costs are more fixed and therefore you should be able to do. And basically value for money, what you're checking is, if I implement this project through PPP, does it add value? Rather than doing the normal way I do, traditional way, I just go to tender under the normal tender. So that's what you're balancing. Is this way better than this way? Does it add value? Then the PIP is supposed to have enough information so that we can also assess the affordability and potential contingent liabilities. Remember, PIPs is not free money. This is not free money. Whether it is part of the budget or not, it is all free money. Assuming, for some reason, we have already signed it to a PPP and that it is terminated, we would have to pay for it because we have an asset. So you have to look, what if this scenario happens? Do we have enough to sustain and pay for it? Because we will get the asset, but the private sector can't go without what they have invested in. So you must provide enough documentation to be able to say, yes, the contingent liabilities we can absorb, and it's affordable. Fair market price. I remember earlier, remember what I said, one of the bottlenecks of PIP is the price. And here you are being told, can you get a fair market price? And for us, KETRACO, we are lucky. Let's say we are lucky. We have been implementing projects for the last 10 years, 14 years. We know we have historical costs of our projects. That is EPC. We have the costs. It's not in doubt. We have the costs. So we know what is fair market price. Somebody cannot come and give us another price and tell us this is market price. We are aware of that. On top of that, you'll find these costs are either the EPC, the tax, we'll come to that later, wayleave costs, they form around 80% of the cost. So already KETRACO has 80% of the cost for all projects, 400, 220, 132, we know. And even if we go to Tanzania, they recently signed a 400 kV, we get the information. So somebody cannot come and give a price and expect to get away with it. So that's an area where we are very strong at, and that's how we make sure that the PIPs is very easy for us to evaluate. Then you should also have supporting documents. These documents are actually listed. If you look under that section, section 42, they are listed earlier there, so you'll be able to see them. Then there should be efficient transfer of risk. That's what PPP stands for. That, yes, we have given the private sector, but have we transferred the risks? Because the risks are supposed to be transferred to the person who can best manage. That's how PPP works, and that's how you get value for money. So we'll also have a risk allocation, which I will show you as we go down. For us to be together, I've tried to put some of the steps and as per the Act. And in this one, the first one is the PIP approval process evaluation. And from A to A6, if you go to the Act, that's exactly the steps you're supposed to follow. If you don't follow that step, then you're not doing the right thing. So the first thing is they will submit, and they'll also pay an unrefundable review fee to the PPP directorate. Then CA evaluates the PIP and submits to the PPP directorate. Then you're supposed to carry out due diligence from the documentation which have been provided on the private party in coordination with the PPP directorate. Remember, when these people when they were submitting this, they had submitted documentation, just like in the normal traditional procurement. They submit, you go through to do due diligence. And that's first level at that stage. It's both legal, financial, and technical. So you go through the documentation, and then you're able to say, yes, this person has the capability. And that's the first level at the PIP stage. Now, from there, of course, that's what I was saying. You assess, you evaluate, it goes to directorate. From there, they forward the same with recommendation to the PPP committee, and then PPP committee guides on the procurement method. So these are very clear in the Act. Let nobody cheat you. You go and look at it. Now, it has been taken forward to project development. So there is also section 43, which deals when the proponent has been told, proceed, go do a detailed study. Again, there's a whole list, I think around six, seven, of the things he has to do. If he doesn't do anything like this during evaluation, he can be knocked out. And it's very clear what is expected. Detailed feasibility study of each is documented there. Then the private party can enter into an agreement. This is an optional or not. It's neither here nor there. So long as the proponent feels he can do them, it's okay. If he feels he can't, we enter into an agreement. Then the private party carries out the project development activities, and this takes 6 months. All these proponents, the two of them, apart from the one who is at the proposal stage, have done this. Then from there, when they submit the documents, then the CA, again, in conjunction with the PPP directorate, just like I said earlier, they form an evaluation committee and go through them. And once they do the same, then the same process repeats itself, and you submit again to the PPP committee. Once the committee approves, then you can go to negotiation. At the same time, you can also publish the feasibility study and project documentation used in the evaluation. So these processes are there. It's not that it's something which is somebody comes up with them, and the criteria is very clear. Now, we come to the negotiation. Assume we have reached that stage, which the two PIPs, that is Africa 50 and Power Grid and Adani Energy Solutions, are at this stage of negotiations. So at this stage, you draft the project agreement, and this is a commercial agreement. You draft the commercial, and there's a lot of discussion back and forth. There are negotiations, a lot of negotiations, very hard negotiations. Then from there, you'll again get you get a project financial assessment report prepared by the negotiating team and also submit. You can get, after that, you're supposed again to get clearance from the Attorney General. So even after you have done, if you have completed negotiation, let's assume we finish somewhere maybe in December for either party, we don't know whoever will succeed. Then we have to submit the same to the AG. The AG has to go through them and give an okay or not. So there has to be no objection. Then from there is where now you're allowed to go to execution of the project agreement between the contractor, contracting authority, and the awarded bidder. And even after that, you have to get ratification from the parliament. This is the process. We have not yet reached that stage. But that is a mandatory stage you have to pass. Now, when you come to risk allocation, I have to give what we are discussing, we have discussed and currently finalizing also with the proponents. And this gives a very detailed one. You can see that public changes in law. I mean, you are the one in charge of law, so that definitely comes to you. Then you go down, political risks. That's always under you. Then the payment risk, because you have to pay after you have invested. So the rest, you can see, most of them have been taken to the proponent. Of course, there's some shared risk, and one of them you can see is, I think, inflation risk. That is shared. It goes further. You can see that also when it comes to termination, default, they are shared, because either party can terminate, and there are consequences for that, and all those are captured in the PA. If one party terminates, what happens? If the government terminates, what happens? Because termination is a very key issue. What will the private sector, what will they get if we terminate? What will he get if he terminates? Because those are two different circumstances. So all that has to be in the PA and clearly discussed and agreed. And it's, if you ask most of the lawyers, they'll tell you these things boil down to a lot of almost things which have become standard in terms of their discussion, in terms of legal and money. That's the financial. What are the financial implications? You are the one who was terminated. You are the one who has caused discomfort. Then you find the penalties are slightly higher on you. But you have to go through the PA. Not just get an excerpt and say, oh, this is what is there. You have to go through the PA, look, okay, this is what he's getting vis-a-vis. So when you look at it, it gives you a broader picture to see how was this really done? How was this negotiation done? So I always ask, look at the PA. And these will be documents, once they are through, they will be public. So it's not something which is out of the normal. Now, we go next to project costs. This one, because we are slightly ahead with the Adani, I'll show you the project cost for Adani. For Africa 50, we are still on the discussions. We are still not reached here. You can see the difference in cost. The first column is when they submitted the project development report. EPC stands for engineering, procurement, and construction. So you can see at that time they were at 466, and for us, we were down because we had done our maths and we knew where it is. So for us, we were slightly below what is put there. We have put 384 because we wanted to calculate value for money. For us, we are expecting that he will go lower than that. What we have put in the PA is that what he needs to do, we don't want Adani to go and get a contractor. There are more than 100 contractors in India. So part of the PA, he has to tender the contracts to the contractors in India. So what is expected from that? That's why we have put a star there. We expect to gain another 40 million. So we expect around 344 after price discovery. So what we are trying to do is that we don't want an issue of where, maybe lawyers call it related transaction, where Adani can go get just from the sister. He's a big company. He can go get to a bank to give him the money, or he can go to his own contractor, and therefore we meet costs which will not be there. What we are saying, go to the market. India is known in terms of contractors. They are always here. Let them do competitive bidding. Let them allow international bidding. Let them get a positive value for that. So this, we expect it to come down. But in the bigger picture, their total cost was around 10, 14. And for us, we were very clear. Right from the beginning, we told them that this is not a discussion because we have prices. We know what these prices are. In fact, if you go to the TMP, I can tell you, you go to the TMP, you look at the project, you can see the estimated price. So we are not playing games. It's something which is there in the public. So all we need to do is total up what is in the public, add what is in the, add for the wayleave cost, then, and a lot of the other costs are actually part of, it's a percentage of these two. It's a percentage of EPC. So the EPC and is the main cost. If you get it right, a lot of it goes down. Because you'll find if it's project management, it's 5%. If it's contingency, it's 10%. But it's 10% of that EPC. So that's the idea. And lastly, he made a revised offer, which came to around 736, which is near where we are. But even then, what we have said, he has to do price discovery. That is part of what is going to be in the PA. Now, there's two other areas. We are, in terms of the cost, in terms of debt equity, we have told the proponents, whether it is Adani or whether it is Africa 50, what is in the Energy Act, they envision 75-25 split. And there's a reason for that. I mean, if you get debt, it's cheaper than equity. So there's a reason. But they have done 70-30. So this is an area which we expect them to go down. Because this area can play around with the final figure. So this is an area where we are saying it should still go to 75-25. Cost of equity, they started at 18. They are now at 16. We are stuck at 14. So there's a lot of negotiation. And this cost of equity, from my finance friends, I know they tell me they use a capital asset pricing model. And it varies because there are a lot of estimates. So even the 14 might be very challenging in this current scenario where we are getting our, what can I call it, where everything is always, every now and then we are getting the valuation of our, of the credit rating. Whenever it is revised, there's a problem. So this is an area, again, where we are seeing where we can reach some agreement. They are at 16. The finance team, which is even not from KETRACO, I'm very sure you have your ideas of what price, a percentage, can be applicable to Kenya. Even if you are to say today Kenya is to float maybe a bond, how much would you expect? My friends tell me around alternative routes, connecting to new load centers, reducing power outages, socio-economic benefits, which occur between when the private sector finishes much earlier than the contracting authority, whose time has been more. Then again, on top of that, once all this is finished and we get the ARR, then we'll have to look at the affordability. Is it sustainable to the country? Does it impose unreasonable financial burden to the contracting authority or the user? So this also will be checked and made clear. Both proponents have requested for government letter of support. So this is handled by National Treasury, And the proposal is also submitted to them, and I know NT, KETRACO, and other people will be engaged in a meeting, and the outcome will come from that meeting. It's not for KETRACO to decide on that one. This slide, I put it there just to inform the public there is a lot of environmental and social safeguards which are taken into consideration for both PIPs. They have to do a thorough feasibility study on this, and this is checked by our experts, and they go through, and just to make sure that we will not have any negative impacts when the projects are created. And in addition, one of the other things is, let's presume that the span is, maybe the term is 30 years. What happens after 30 years? In what state do you get the project? So those are also captured to make sure that if it is 30 years, if it is 27 years, if it is 33 years, then you get that station in as good condition that it can work for you for the next maybe 20 to 30 years. We have seen transmission lines going to up to 50, 60 years. So you can have a very good transmission line even after that. Same thing with the substations.